I want to now bring in trial attorney and legal analyst Misty Marris. Misty, it's always good to have you. All eyes on this judge today. And I know that this likely won't be decided today, but do you think this guy's going to get deported?
So this is actually a very complicated situation, as was laid out by the reporter who just spoke about all the different aspects of this particular case, which is going to be a case of first impression, meaning these are the types of issues that are going to be working their way through the courts. But Marky, to answer your question, today's particular conference, there's going to be a threshold question about whether or not this particular court, which is a district court in New York, the Southern District, New York, whether or not that court even has authority to speak to the issue of whether this individual can be deported or not. So first, it's put on pause as of now. There's a stay while a hearing will ultimately take place to address these issues. But the first issue that arises is this the correct venue? And even if the judge were to deem that the federal court in the Southern District has authority, an immigration court could still commence an action. An action could still be commenced in an immigration court. So regardless of what happens at today's hearing, there's a whole other path to pursue through the immigration court system, which is where both parties are seeking clarity on whether or not that is the more appropriate venue for this case.
Yeah, and Misty, too, ICE arrested him, saying that he's being investigated as a national security threat. What charges do you think that they could bring up against him? What are you expecting there?
Well, what's interesting is there have been no criminal charges as of yet. So unless there were additional facts that we're not currently aware of about perhaps particular affiliations or funding of groups that are deemed terrorists by the United States, there's nothing abundantly clear about what has been criminal as of now from the facts that are publicly available. The argument that the administration is raising, and again, this is where it's going to be testing the executive authority versus the free speech, is that the executive branch holds the power to revoke the legal status, the green card status, if they're deemed a national security threat. What does that mean? Well, it means that regardless of whether or not there are criminal charges brought, which is usually in these cases, that's what you see, but here there are none as of yet. If they were to present this to a judge, whether it be in the Southern District or an immigration court, they have to prove by clear and convincing evidence that there is justification to revoke that status. So all of that is at play here. And with the executive order, there's going to be a question mark about where that authority lies. And this case law, starting with this case, is going to begin to develop if more of these actions are taken by the administration.
You know, you bring up evidence, and I wanted to play a bit of sound for you, Misty, because, President Trump has made good on his promise when he vowed to deport students who participated in these protests and, over the war in Gaza. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt accusing Khalil of handing out Hamas propaganda. Take a listen to what she said.
But also distributed pro-Hamas propaganda, flyers with the logo of Hamas. That is what the behavior and activity that this individual engaged in.
Now, just to state for everybody listening at home, we've not seen these pamphlets that have reportedly been given out. But if there is evidence of that, Misty, is that going to be enough to get him deported?
Could it be enough? I think this is where we're really testing the line of what is free speech, because remember, a green card holder has all of the protections that any United States citizen would have, meaning constitutional protections of the First Amendment apply to that individual. So the question is, where does free speech begin and end, right? So whether or not you agree with speech, even deplorable speech, is protected under the First Amendment. The line is when you have either a national security threat, you have threats to other individuals, or conduct that goes beyond speech and goes into a threat to another individual or group. So that would be one piece of evidence that would be presented to the court, along with more than just that, in order to achieve that standard of clear and convincing evidence as per prior case law. But we're in a new situation with an executive order that speaks specifically to these types of deportations. So you have the free speech issue, and then you also have that balance of powers between the executive judicial and legislative branch. So it's actually a very complicated
There's
issue.
so many different legs to this case. We'll see what comes of today, and I'm curious what people everywhere who have been front and center at these protests are thinking right now. Misty Marris, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marky.